G'day little nippers, and welcome to the show, and to another Top 10 video. Top 10 of what, you may ask?
Historians from England will say I am a liar.
Well, yes. And other countries, I imagine, too. Indeed, we are going to be doing a top 10 least historic films. Films that without a doubt clueless history teachers will have shown children without even knowing it's true at all. So, let's do the time warp and dive straight in at number 10. Let's go.
Tell this man, if he does not shoot me, I will kill him.
Captain, if I might have a word.
You have children?
French.
Number 10. 300. Now, as outrageously inaccurate as this film is, I mean, come on. Spartans did wear armour and not whatever this is. No rhinos, no elephants, no mad half-goat monsters or beasts fought in this battle. And, the less said about Xerxes, the better. He didn't look like this. I will give the film props that the entire film is a story that is being told to other Spartans, and isn't meant to reflect what actually happened, but told to inspire the rest of the Spartan army before another battle. So I think I can be a little bit more forgiving, as it's clear that this isn't trying to reflect history much at all, and makes the story of Leonidas and the Battle of Thermopylae as epic and as great as possible.
Spartans! Lay down your weapons!
Persians! Come and get them!
Number 9. Gladiator. To put it bluntly and basically as possible, I wouldn't mind this film if this was a standalone fictional story about Maximus. A general of the Northern Army fighting the German tribes is all well and good. However, it starts including real historic figures like Julius Caesar and his son Commodus, and have them say really bizarre things like this.
Do you see that map, Maximus? That is the world which I created.
Really? Just you, huh? Makes it seem as though the gladiators had poor living, when really they would have been really taken care of like a racehorse would today. They were invested property, don't forget, back then. They were slaves, and expensive ones at that. Trouble is, once you go down this slippery slope of creative freedom, you are compelled to still tell the real story, otherwise it won't make sense and be discredited. However, like 300, it focuses on things that should, from about the mid-second half, tells a pretty decent story, so I'll still put this pretty low on the list.
How will the world speak my name in years to come? Will I be known as the philosopher, the warrior, the tyrant?
Number 8. 10,000 BC. Okay, this film was totally insane. Not only do I really need to say woolly mammoths did not live in the bleeding desert. They certainly did not help construct any pyramids, and worse, pyramids didn't even come around until some 8,000 years later. So, all in all, a pretty bad start. The reason why it's so low on the list, however, well, because pretty much everything about it is destroyed by the end, leaving no trace for anything to be found. So yeah, that's why. Everything gets blown up at the end, so I guess that paves the way for little creative freedom, I guess. Though it does make you think, why make the story at all if you're not going to do anything about the history? I mean, the title 10,000 BC kind of gives it away. The story isn't well thought out much either, and the overall feeling was just very generic and really out there with its characters and plot. 10,000 BC, an overall mammoth disappointment. Number 7. The Last Samurai. So, this film is like a fan fiction. Pretty much that's it. The film is based in the late 1800s Japan, and apparently they hired an American Civil War veteran to train their reformed army, when actually the Japanese did not hire a single American, owing to the fact that pretty much they forced Japan to open their borders against their will in a rather humiliating way. So, yeah, chances of them wanting anything to do with them is a pretty long shot. No, most of their military advisors in those days were French and British. But all that is a grain of sand when compared to Tom Cruise's character and what he does in the film. Ugh. So, he gets captured by a shockingly competent samurai army against what should be a reasonably skilled Japanese imperial army at this point, and becomes a samurai after spending time with a village. No. Just no. Next.
Tell this man, if he does not shoot me, I will kill him.
Captain, if I might have a word.
Number 6. Apocalypto. Okay, now here is the part of the list where things start getting a little crazy. Set in apparently the Mayan kingdom before the Spanish arrive, or is it? Guys, if that's smallpox, that didn't come until the Spanish already arrived. So, you make the big reveal at the end with the Spanish coming and everything, but if there's an outbreak of smallpox, then they've already been here. So, what you doing? Also, the Mayan people did not have this kind of decor and culture. This is more Aztec a couple of hundred years before. Think about it. Offering sacrifices on a pyramid, the jade jewellery, the bones. Mayans wore animal skins and fabric, not this kind of tribal hunter-gatherer style warrior defect they seem to have gone with. And also, what the hell is this? He picked up the poison dart frog with his hand. You know, 2 salt grains worth of their venom is enough to kill 20 people. 20 people. That's 10 people per salt grain. So, yeah, how he is not dead after shoving his hand on it. Look, I know plot armour is notoriously thick, but Mel, come on, Mel. Come on. No. Number 5. Pearl Harbor. Oh, Michael. What are you doing? This whole film is blatant Americanism, plain and simple. I can't remember the last time I ever saw a film kiss America's backside more than this one does. It shows in the cinematography, the shots of the American innocence, the symbolism, the way they portray the Japanese, which is, well, quite frankly a little offensive at times. The Japanese never attacked the hospital. Stop reinventing history to suit your whatever this is. Look, I know the Japanese did some pretty terrifying atrocities during the war, but they only attacked military targets at Pearl Harbor. You cannot make history up. This is a good example of why historic films are notoriously difficult to make. There is only so much freedom of creativity you have before things start to become unbelievable. Also, the film is forcing some kind of romance between 2 people who really do not have any real chemistry. So you can't even like it for the little amount of coherent plot they do have. Not only is this one of the worst historic films I've ever seen, I think it's without doubt the worst Bay film I have ever seen, and that really breaks my heart. Number 4. Pocahontas. Yeah, 11 seconds. That's all it took. Wow. Just wow. I don't think I've ever seen a movie more wrong in less time. They set sail in 1606. I mean, what is this? Hello again, Mel. Welcome to your second round in a bad history movie. I think what makes this film worse is that it's made for kids. And this isn't the only one, unfortunately. Anastasia, The Magic Voyage, that. Films based on real historic figures and events cannot be simplified or embellished with childish magic, in my opinion. Because in order to understand people properly, even as a kid, you need to show them in a realistic light. Pocahontas wasn't even her real name. She was only 11 when John Smith arrived on the shores of Virginia, and she had no romantic interest in the 27-year-old. Yeah, imagine my shock. Oh yeah, and there was also no talking tree or funny animals. I know, shocking. No talking animals. And perhaps most importantly of all, John Smith was not this handsome, blonde, blue-eyed, chisel-chinned Chad that we all see on the screen. In reality, he looked like this.
And he had one thing you haven't got.
What's that, sir?
A great big bushy beard.
Pocahontas. Just... ugh. Okay, now we are into the final 3. This is where things start to get downright unpleasant. So, prepare yourselves for a wild one, little nippers. Ugh, here we go. Number 3. Braveheart. Never fear, Mel is here again with another historic disaster, Braveheart.
Historians from England will say I am a liar.
Yes. Most likely. You have the wrong date, you plum. So, here we go, an actual fact quickfire. The date is wrong at the start. The Scots never wore kilts this early.
Lord of these lands, I will bless this marriage by taking the bride on the first night of her union.
The English never practiced prima noctua. The battles were more often than not guerrilla-style ambushes, not full-scale battles like this.
If we win, we'll have what none of us have ever had before. A country of our own.
What? Whatever that line was supposed to mean. And... yeah, he didn't say that. Not with his intestines in someone else's hand. I think it would have been something like... And the last one I'll say, as I'll be here all bloody day otherwise. Scots never painted their faces blue. Painting faces blue was practiced by the Picts, which were a pagan tribe of people living in Scotland during the Roman times. And considering how Catholic Scotland was back then, and how much the church hated everything other than Catholics, yeah, that wouldn't have flied. And also... aren't you, forgetting something? No, I don't think so. About a certain English princess? Okay, well, I'll have a look. Isabella was just 3 years old at the Battle of Falkirk, and Edward III wasn't born until 7 years after Wallace's death. Yet the film wants you to believe that her and Wallace had a thing. Who directed this again? Nothing else to say about this film. It's awful. And its awful take on portraying the English as just bullish thugs doesn't really help either. But the story just... it isn't coherent at all. If it wasn't William Wallace and not based on history at all, maybe it could have been a little more enjoyable, but as it is, no. It's just awful. Number 2. The Patriot. If my fingers could move, I would be drumming them. Thanks. Mel, what do you have against history and the English? I mean, I genuinely do not know where to begin with this blatant piece of anti-English propaganda. It's just downright unpleasant. All the characters on the British side of the American Civil War in this film are portrayed in just about the worst light you can put in. Almost to a cartoonish level. I say almost because, well, some parts are just downright disturbing.
I killed those men.
You did what I told you to do. You did what you had to. There was no wrong in it.
I'm glad I killed them. I'm glad.
He's talking about killing British soldiers, by the way. Yeah, charming. But bear in mind, in real life, just 1/3 of people in the American colonies supported being independent of Britain at this time. Independence was a brand new idea. The idea of seceding from another country was totally not done before. And yes, it's easy to portray modern concepts like freedom and liberty now, but the idea was almost completely unexplored in these days. People didn't want to fight with Britain. Yet this part made me laugh in the movie. You know, when the American defector is introduced, the director has made the audience feel a certain way about this character. He's the dog, the dirty, traitorous snake. But you know what the funny thing was? Thousands upon thousands of people from the colonies joined the British out of the same patriotic fervour that the rebels joined Washington. Yet this film would have you believe that everyone supported it. Everyone supported war with Britain, and that simply isn't the case. Now, I mentioned in Pearl Harbor that the way that the Americans portrayed the Japanese was offensive, but that is nothing compared to this.
Shut the doors.
But you said we'd be forgiven.
And indeed you may!
That's between you and God.
Film, I am speechless. Do you think for one moment that if this really happened, it would be still 1/3 of people supporting the war? I think Nick Hodges from History Buff summed it up the best.
Because there is nothing in written records to suggest that the British ever burnt a church filled with civilians. If anything like this were to have happened, it would have been burnt into the memory of every American today. Can you imagine the propaganda value this would have had for the Patriot cause back then? Take, for example, the impact of the infamous Boston Massacre, and only 5 people died there, probably making it the most unmassacring massacre in the history of massacres.
Yeah, I mean, my God, America, how much do you hate the English to portray them like, pretty much like Nazis did in World War II? Not only would any officer of any era of the British Army refuse to do this, but even if they were this bloodthirsty, to the British, these were their subjects. It would make no tactical sense to do this to their own people. The Patriot, one of the worst historic films of all time in terms of offence, inaccuracy, bloated Americanism, and just plain hatred.
By the rules of war.
Would you like a lesson, sir, in the rules of war?
Or perhaps your children will.
And the #1 worst film of history in history is 1492 Conquest of Paradise. Columbus, the discoverer of the Americas, famous explorer, rich trader, Italian wine connoisseur, mass murderer, genocidal maniac, deprived lunatic, greedy gold grabber, subjugator of millions, mutilator of bodies, and conquering overlord of the Western world. Sound like the Columbus you were taught about? Okay, this film came out in 1992 to, quote, celebrate the 500th anniversary of Columbus's journey to the West. Think about that for a moment. Of course, it should be said that Columbus discovering the Americas is a monumental event in history, and the act should for sure be celebrated. The man himself, however, not so much. The man was without a doubt one of the most evil, deprived, and despicable human beings in history. We're often told how Hitler reaches the #1 of any top 10 most evil human beings on the list, and for sure he should be. But this guy, this guy slaughtered, mutilated, and enslaved so many natives, he caused many parts of that area of the country to go extinct. Just think about that. Gone extinct. Those people no longer exist because of him. Now, that being said about Columbus, one of the numerous problems I have with the film is that it focuses on telling the myth and stories of Columbus rather than what actually happened on the voyage. If you watch this film, please dismiss everything about it historically, as almost nothing happened the way it is portrayed. But the reason I'm making this #1 is that it's not glorifying the actual journey, the actual act of discovering the Americas, which it should be, but glorifying the myth of the man personally, making him out to be a righteous and decent man. It's just so distasteful. It's like making a life story about Hitler, and the message at the end was, you know what, maybe Hitler wasn't such a bad guy after all. It's just gross, and the historical inaccuracies are just too many to list. But let me put it to you like this. Ironically, the bad guy on Columbus's crew that commits the atrocities in this film, pretty much all of them were committed by Columbus himself, and I find it incredible that the filmmakers are visibly bending over backwards to try and cover this up. And I just don't know why. Why are you trying to create some kind of good story about him personally? I just don't understand why. 1492 Conquest of Paradise was a huge flop at the box office, thank God. Rightfully so. Its distasteful and offensive reimbursement of the myth of Columbus as a man is just so out there. I almost can't believe it exists.
1492 Conquest of Paradise.
And so, little nippers, 1492 is becoming my very first 0 out of 10 Croc points. There is literally no redeeming qualities in this film whatsoever. Even from the story and the acting, it's just nothing. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this top 10, and be sure to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and, if you can, support me on Patreon. See you in a while, crocodiles!
And he had one thing you haven't got.
What's that, sir?
A great big bushy beard.